why are we here today? Well, this is the church where all the royalty of France is buried. So we're going royalty spotting. But we're not just going to be royalty spotting, we're going to be visiting one very special lady. Hello and good morning. Today we are in Paris. To be precise, we are near the Basilique de Saint-Denis. It's the church where all the royalty of France is buried. And we're going to be visiting one very special queen. We're going to be visiting the tomb of Marie de Medici. Well, you may ask, who is Marie de Medici? Marie de Medici was a lady from Florence who was married off to the King of France in exchange for a rather large sum of money, because her family were the Medici. They were a very, very rich banker family from Florence. France owed a lot of money to these Medici, and he didn't want to pay it off. So they offered him, we can forget about the debts, you just have to marry our daughter. So they married off Marie de Medici to Henri de Navarre, Henri of France, which was not the smartest move. Because years before there had been another Medici daughter married off also to a king of France. He died and she became regent of France for a while, and well, that was a bit of a black page in the history of France. We're talking Catherine de Medici here. Her reign, well, there were religious wars, there was a massacre. Like I said, it's a black page in history. So why ever they thought why it was a good idea to marry off another daughter of the same family to the same king of France, well, as you can see in this video, it didn't work out quite so well. Like I said, we're here now at the Basilique de Saint-Denis to see if we can find her, if we can find a tomb or a memorial to her. This is not the first time we've tried to find her. And the story is typical of how they treated Marie de Medici here in France. We went to the castle of Pau, the birth castle of this King Henri. And there are 3 portraits of Marie there that tell the story exactly. We see a painting of Henri arriving at his castle, and there on the tower is this beautiful lady. He is looking up to her from his horse, and you can see he's adoring her. That is his first meeting with Marie de Medici. The second painting we see her lying in bed, obviously tired. We see Henri next to the bed, jubilant because he's got a son. She's given him a son. This son, by the way, is Louis XIII of France later on. And the third portrait we see, that's the peculiar one. Here we see Henri again with his 2 sons. He's got Louis, he's got little Gaston. He's playing with them, he's playing horsey ride. And you see, if you look very closely, you see a hand protecting the boys. But it's from a lady who's totally in the shadows. She's standing behind the man and his boys, but she's painted totally in the shadows. And if you look closely, that's Marie. That's why you see she did what she was told to do. She married this king of France, she gave him sons, but France hated her. Because of her ancestor, because of her family name. I don't know, maybe she was a totally obnoxious person, I don't know. Fact is, they hated her. I think, because of what I told you before, I think this poor woman didn't stand a chance. France was never gonna like her. But anyway, here we are at the basilic that houses all these graves. We're gonna see if she's here. Will you join us? Well, there's the front door. We're going in. Like I said, we're going royalty spotting. Who am I hoping to see? Well, of course, Marie. I'm guessing her son, Louis the 13th of France. And no, that is not the Sun King. The Sun King is Louis the 14th. That's his son. Maybe his wife is here, Anne of Austria. That's a marriage that Marie arranged. She was famous for arranging marriages for all her children. One of her daughters went on to become Queen of Spain. One of her other daughters went on to be Queen of England and Scotland. So we're going to see who's here. I'm quite excited. Well, this giant tomb is the grave of Henri II and Catherine de Medici. Upstairs you see them in marble praying, but down here it's very weird. They're both half naked, lying there. It's a very strange tomb, but it is beautiful. Standing near the altar now. Marie de Medici was crowned Queen of France right here. This was the place of her coronation. Well, at that time she was of course the spouse of Henry, but later on he was assassinated, and she reigned for 7 years, I think, because her son Louis was obviously way too small to reign. So yeah, here she is crowned as spouse of, but she became Queen of France later on. We just asked the man who sat here, who obviously belonged to this church. He told us some very interesting things. He said everybody from that time, Louis the 13th, Henri, Marie de Medici, in the time they were just buried down here in the crypt. They were just put into a double coffin, a layer of lead and a layer of wood, and they just stood in the crypt. There were no memorials, there were no effigies in that time. So when the revolution came, those coffins were stripped of their lead because they wanted to make weapons out of that. And that's why all the bones were put together in the yard later on. That's why we have the monument downstairs, where there's just a great plaque with all the names and all the bones inside. So everything that was put in here, the portrait of Henri, the plaques, they were all of a later date, made to commemorate them. it's a bit dark here. But we're now in the crypt at the chapel of the Bourbon family. Let's see who we can find here. This is a memorial to Henri, the spouse of Marie de Medici. There it says, Henri le quatrième roi de France et de Navarre. We found this one. It's a plaque. It's commemorative of her. But our French is not that good, but we can read Je suis morte en exil de Cologne. She's died in exile while living in Cologne in France, in Germany. We need to translate the rest. At least this is dedicated to her. Le Louvre de Paris fit éclater ma gloire. The Louvre in Paris will show my glory. That's nice. Marie de Médicis. Elsa, Louis XIII, Gaston d'Orléans. Our daughters. Well, I told you, Marie has been Queen of France for 7 years. She was regent for her son. But like I said, France really didn't like Marie. And I have the perfect story to illustrate that. Somewhere near here, there's a tiny little castle. It's called the Bussy-Rabutin. The lord of that castle, well, he was crazy about French royalty. So his entire castle is filled with pictures of royalty. There are all the queens, all the kings of France, all the regents, they are all there. And he was especially fond of Louis XIII. There's a tiny room in his castle that's dedicated to Louis XIII. He's there with a gorgeous portrait. His wife is there next to him, Anne of Austria, also a gorgeous portrait. His brother is there, his father is there, his Chancellor Armand Duplessis, better known as Cardinal de Richelieu, is there. So everybody from that chapter is there, except Marie de Medici. We went to the people in that castle and we asked them, where are Marie de Medici and Catherine de Medici? We can't find them. And the answer we got was a very snide, nous déteste l'italien. We hate the Italians. That says it all for me. That years and years and years later, he didn't say at the time they hated them. No, his answer was, we hate the Italians. It tells the story of Marie to me. This is another very famous couple. Here we have Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. Yes, the one from Let Them Eat Cake. They're gorgeous. Well, that was our visit to Saint Denis. I loved it here. I had goosebumps when I was down there in the crypt. Very impressive visit. So, this was it for this episode of Little Big History. See you next time.